Welcome to the Embodied Sounds podcast. My name is Joshua Sam Miller. I'm a musician, environmentalist, and entrepreneur focused on helping people connect back to the natural world through the arts. On this podcast, we'll be exploring specifically how sound can help you live a more healthy and balanced life. Please learn more at embodiedsounds.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Embodied Sounds podcast. I'm here today with a very good friend of mine, an incredible musician, composer, and musical genius, Will Marsh. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joshua. I'm really happy to be here today.
And where are we catching you this morning?
I live in Novato, which is a lovely town in Marin County, just north of San Francisco.
Amazing. A very familiar stomping ground of mine as well. And you have a lot going on at the moment. You have a album that's about to come out next month, as well as a live concert to premiere the album and release it. So tell us how you're feeling about everything that's happening in your musical life these days.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I don't think I've ever felt this energized by a project before. And I just think it has so much to do with, it's the biggest statement I've ever made. You know, it's so personal to share this music that to me kind of sums up my whole journey through music, studying all kinds of different styles. And this album really, to me, puts that into a voice that is my voice. And to be able to share that is just an energizing, exciting thing. And even though there's so much to do, and you know, it takes a lot of work to put all these things together, even with support. But I'm finding that I'm just excited every day to wake up and be like, all right, what are we doing today to bring this to life and to share this vision and music? So. Yeah, I'm feeling very blessed to be here.
That's great to hear. And you definitely deserve all of this energy that you're feeling. I feel like ever since I've met you, I've always been quite impressed by just how much you give to your musical practice and have done that over many, many years. So I'm curious, maybe to start off, if you would share with our listeners, what do you do on a regular basis as a musician to stay inspired, to stay fresh on your instrument? What type of a practice or just motivating routine have you cultivated over the years?
Yeah, I would say that I'm always studying music. That has been something that I've been constantly doing since I was 13. And right now I'm continuing my studies in Hindustani music on sitar. I feel that it's a never-ending journey that to me makes it so inspiring, and it makes me want to put more into it and learn more and study more. So I meet every week with my guru, Tushar Bhatia, who is in Mumbai, and we meet on Zoom. My Tuesday night is his Wednesday morning. And just having that weekly time, even though it's an hour, like the things that he can express in that hour that give me food for thought and something to practice, it keeps the inspiration and the commitment. And I just love it. I love being a student. And I'm heading, later next month to go spend some time with him in person. So throughout my life, I've always had great teachers like this, also for guitar, classical guitar, for different types of, improvisation-based music. And I've studied West African drumming and percussion, and, all the time that I got to spend with these teachers, that's really what kind of motivates my practice and keeps it regular, and something that I just love having in life. And for me now with guitar, because I studied a lot of guitar, it's more of the creative inspiration, right? It's I don't take lessons on guitar, but I just love to sit down, sometimes in the evening when you've done all your stuff for the day, but you're still kind of clear. And I love just sitting with my instrument in those times, which is most nights of the week. I get that time to just sit and listen and create. And that is another big part of my practice. And that's where a lot of the composition comes from. And so that's another thing, that just sitting with the instrument in a space of, I just want to hear and play and like be with my instrument. And I do that with both, but sitar is the one that still has a little more of a pedagogy and learning, that it remains constant, whereas guitar to me is a tool and a vehicle to kind of just explore. And that's a lot of what you'll hear on the album, is kind of that combination of these instruments. And yeah, that's a bit of a nutshell. And I always have some music that kind of is piquing my interest more than others at certain times too, and that's really fun. Lately, I've been really into this Brazilian artist, and yeah, just the type of voicings that is used in that music and the harmonies, and it's just, I'm kind of listening with curiosity because I don't know much about these forms and these styles, and so my ear's always curious too. I love listening to things that I'm just pique my interest, and I'm like, what are these instruments, and how are they feeling this groove? And yeah, there's always things to be inspired by, listening wise.
I can definitely relate to that for sure. And thank you for giving us that insight. I think there's a lot that both new musicians as well as established musicians can learn from hearing that insight into more of your life behind the scenes, when you're not on stage and in the studio even, but just those nights at home to make time to be with your guitar and with your sitar, I imagine are quite rewarding on many levels. And of course, on this podcast, we're really interested in how music can improve our state of mind, our overall well-being. And I'm curious if that's been true for you, as since 13 when you started taking lessons. Does music help to allow you to relax or unwind or feel better and healthier in your life?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can't imagine life without music, so it's almost hard to like even fathom. And it's just become a lifestyle. And yeah, there's so many levels at which, to me, it is a spiritual practice as well, because you're so present when you're with sound and when you're sitting. And, music can encompass your whole stream of consciousness and your body, because it's physical. You're using your body, you're in your body, and then you're also, sound is something that there's no limit to what you can perceive, right? If you study the physics of sound, there's just the overtone series, and the way that our ears take in sound. It's a trip how all of that works. So just in my experience, I know that when I tune in with sound, I go to a different place. And it's a practice, right? Sometimes the mind's still wandering, and that's why I love to warm up. I love to play scales and just like get grounded in my instrument and calibrate my mind. And, I play in a lot of settings where there's different spiritual practices going on, and I love being around that. And for me, the music is that practice. It's that way of tuning into more awareness, more body. The thoughts aren't just jumping around like they do in our day-to-day tasks of just what do I have to do next. The musical space is something much different, and that's something that I've connected with all of my teachers as well. It's like there's a joy in music, there's a space in music that is kind of incomparable to anything else in life. Um,
Mm.
and that's a very simple way of putting it. I think it's like I can't really say that there's a space or a joy or a presence, a place of being that compares to me, the music, being in music, expressing music. That's just that's the highest state of being I've experienced personally.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's talk about some of the tracks that are coming through on this new record. The record is called The Integration, which features 7 songs that have been written over the last you tell me. I understand them to be about 2-3 years, but maybe it's longer. Is that, do you have a correction on that?
Yeah, some of the tunes actually were being started to write around 2018. Um,
Wow.
not all of them, but the integration, the title track, actually, those ideas and that composition started emerging around 2018. Another track, The Weekly Blues, 2019. But they were still being refined and kind of envisioned up until, yeah, the past 6 months. We've still been dialing in instruments. So yeah, it's been a pretty long process, but I feel like the tunes kind of called for that. Yeah.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And I'm very happy we're talking about this because 5 years in the making, this record. And
Yes.
I think that that deserves a moment to let it sink in, to realize how much effort and work and time and embracing the path of creative development really, and patience probably was required, I imagine, to get to this point. And really, really congratulate you on all of that success, as your friend, and of course also the producer on the record. It's been really incredible to witness. And I feel like a lot of people in the creative arts think that things happen very fast, and if I'm not having this many listeners or this many songs released by X date, then I've failed, and I think it's really important to like bring attention to the fact that to really sometimes produce a body of work that's so original and authentic as The Integration is for you, that takes time. And these are really incredible songs. And I'm excited to listen to them and share them with the world. So what is the first one you like to share with us today?
Hmm. I think the first one I'd love to talk about is called Fields of Promise.
Cool. I love that one.
Hmm.
What's Fields of Promise all about?
Yeah, so Fields of Promise, it's a really fun tune because it brings together musical expressions that I've never really heard intertwined. And so I love to play a nylon string guitar. It's one of my favorite ways of playing guitar. I've got the guitar fingernails, and there's such a richness in exploring harmony, like with ninth chords and half diminished chords, and just the color that you can get from harmony, and especially played on an nylon string guitar. And it was just one day I was sitting out. I had just moved up here to Marin County, and it was spring. Everything's lush and green, and I pretty much wrote a chord chart that has a kind of jazzy samba sound, but it uses a lot of these color chords, a lot of motion and harmonic um, expression. And I just loved that those chords that I wrote. I was like, this is great. It was something I wrote down and was like, all right, I'm going to work with this more. And as I sat with it, I started to hear what the other instruments would be, and I was exploring, finding the melody. We have the chords. Where's the melody? And I feel the best way to often find a melody is to sing, right? That's what makes a good melody to me, is it's like a voice. It's something that you can carry, you can sticks in your head, or there's a naturalness to the voice. So I took this chord progression and I just started singing with it and finding the melody, and it came out, this kind of long, spacious melody. Da 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 da. And then I'm thinking, you know, what if I play this melody on the sitar and use like Hindustani expressions, traditional sitar ornaments to bring out this kind of spacious jazz melody? And that was just like this moment of, wow, I love where this is going. Like, because, the instrument, sitar isn't really used in jazz context that much, and especially with a lot of chord changes. But there's so much expression and melody with the sitar as a voice. And so I just sat with it and I came up with that expression of the melody on sitar, and it was just instantly just exciting. It's like, this is something I've never heard anything like it, and I love this. And so I'm going deeper. Now I've got the harmony, the chords, and the sitar, and then I was kind of like, well, what would complement this sound? I want some type of wind instrument, some breath, something like that. And that led to the idea of sax. And sure enough, you, my friend, have tenor sax and a beautiful expression through wind instruments. And just hearing that you were excited to jump in on this was like, oh, how cool. Like, my producer, my friend, who's like a part of this project, is ready to jump in on this important part. So that just like was a sign. It just lined up, and hearing you come up and bring that, and that really brings the jazz. When you have tenor sax, it just like really brings that quality of, of a certain style and sound. And that interacting with the sitar rhythmically, we've got the pandeiro, which is like a Brazilian tambourine, and it just really sets such a nice groove and feel. We also have some bass giving our low end, and beautiful drum set work by our friend Bodek in Berlin, with a lot of cymbals and kind of soft brush work. So this is kind of the whole story of the composition and the instrumentation: sitar, tenor sax, pandeiro, drum set, bass, guitar. And I've just never heard a sound like that. And it gives me a feeling and takes me to a place that I love. And that's kind of the story of how that was composed, and what instruments express it.
What a good story it is. Well, we'll talk more about it in a bit, but let's have a listen. This is Fields of Promise by Will Marsh and Joshua Sam Miller. we hope you enjoyed listening to that. It's one of our favorites on the album. And as Will mentioned, he was so sweet and considerate to invite me to play on this track as a new tenor sax player. I've really only been playing for about 2-3 years now, but when we recorded that first part, it was really in that first year as a tenor player, and was such a motivating experience for me to really get in the studio and practice and learn an existing composition, which was very rewarding on multiple levels. And it was a really fun composition to learn how to solo and improvise with, which was really a first for me, fitting within a structure of a set time and existing, kind of chord progression. So thank you again for the invitation to play on that track. And it really is one of my favorites on the album. It kind of stood out, I think, as the first that really warranted a lot more work on the percussion side. And I remember when we were listening to it after we married the sax and the sitar together and the guitar underneath us, was kind of obvious that we needed something that felt a bit more spacious in the percussion than only the pandado track that was there as well. And I remember kind of the natural flow of finding Bodic through my connections here in Berlin, and just good energy really was fun, and was like, wow, this piece really does have some life to it, and some special quality that attracts a very unique type of sound and hopefully listener. So definitely one of my favorites on the record, and something that I think blends together this Eastern and Western lineage in such a powerful way, which I know has been a big part of your background as an artist, and also just a human being, spending so much time traveling to India and other places in the East. So I'm curious if you would share with us a bit of how that fusion really works for you as both a Western trained and Eastern studied musician. What inspires you about the fusion of those two cultures? Because I think that's a really unique part of the sound that you're channeling through.
Totally, great question. It's something that I think a lot about, because for better or worse, this term fusion is kind of the default when you're talking about different styles and cultures. And to me, that word doesn't really express what's going on for me personally, because the name of the album is The Integration, and to me it is more of an integrative process, because I feel like there's this tendency in music production and creation to be like, oh, let's take a great classical guitarist, and then let's take a master Indian violinist, and let's put them in a room and press record, and it's fusion. And there's magical things that can happen with that. Of course, you have masters from two lineages, and they can relate, they have common ground to meet on. But in many ways, it lacks a certain integration, because in a lot of cases, the two parties will actually know very little about each other's music in terms of the real depth and articulation of it. And for me, I'm just trying to say, like, what do I have to say based on everything that I've learned? And like, how does it come out of me naturally as an artist with a voice? And so I'm not saying that like fusion's bad, or that that's a bad thing to do, to like just take masters and mix them together, but I'm bringing it up because I don't feel like my intention has actually been to say, oh, I want to mix this music with that music and try to fuse it. I'm actually just trying to be like, well, I spent half my life like playing guitar, classical, and playing blues on my Fender Strat, and I love Jimi Hendrix, and I love Maurice Ravel, and I'm obsessed about Hindustani raga, and these rhythms from all over the world. Like, what does that mean to, like, how does that come out in a way that is just me expressing my musicality. And so that's been the most exciting thing about this project is I do feel that it has been a natural process. It's just like we talked about, it's just sitting with your instrument in that time when you can be relaxed and open to creativity and hearing. Like that's how these pieces emerged. I
Mm.
didn't like sit down and think like, like this raga, and then I want to put this and make it into something Western and mix it. That is happening in a way. If you analyze the music theoretically, you can see, and I can tell you how, oh yeah, I did find this movements of a raga on my guitar in my piece, The Integration, but that wasn't the motivation for how I wrote it, right? It was like, I grew up playing these long scales on classical guitar that you do to kind of warm up and get clear, nice tone. And I there's a passage like that that uses a rag movement. That's like the theme of The Integration. And I didn't think about that conceptually. It just like I'm sitting and I want to express this music. I want it to come out. And so that's been my process, is that desire to be like, well, who is Will Marsh? What do I sound like? What do I have to say from my musical soul? And
Mm.
it's really fun, and I think it wouldn't have been the same without all these years of study I've put into multiple traditions. And I think that's what gives me a unique voice, is just I've been equally immersed in the study of Western music and Hindustani. And so they're both very much a part of my language. And at the same time, I don't think either fully represents me, right? I love playing traditional Indian music and I perform and teach, and it's a big part of my life, but it's not my full, right? It's a part of what I do and carry on and study, but it's not the integration of everything. It's not my unique voice. It's me in one language, one part of my expression. So yeah, that's kind of, I think about this a lot, because when you're in music, you have to think of genres, and people are going to try to describe your music, and world music fusion. It's not like I'm like, oh, this is terrible, I don't identify with this, but there's a little more underneath it, right? There's a little more to talk about. And I think this is a time when these experiences are possible more, because if you think about it, it wasn't easy to study Hindustani music from Europe or the West for very long. I mean, we're getting close to 50 years where there's been that time,
Mm.
but that's not very long. You look at human history, it's so yeah, I'm also a unique person in a unique time where like I can study online with my teacher in India when I'm not there in India. And that's like I'm fully immersed in that tradition. I'm from a little town in Michigan, yet I've spent, 15, 16 years like fully deep into that tradition, which is unique to the times that we live in. So
Mm.
it's another part of it too.
Absolutely. And uh, well done on your part to really recognize that and make use of the times that we're living in, especially in these last couple of years with COVID and everything. I feel like certainly in the production of this album, I feel like you really made the most of the time that you had, to be working on it and see the world as being more accessible rather than less accessible because of technology and access to foreign cultures, which, yeah, to your point, I would agree, within the last 50 or so years have become much more within reach for, um, yeah, as you say, a kid from Michigan to go explore his Indian music interests. And before we listen to the next song, which I think is a really cool blend of that integration, what was the first trip to India like for you? What was the interest in uh, exploring music from the subcontinent? I'm curious if you'd share a bit of that backstory, if you can remember, because I know it was over a decade or so ago.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with just kind of, I never expected to go deep into Hindustani music and play sitar. That was just not on my radar. But I was very curious about other music. Like ever since I was 14, 15, I would just listen to everything. So I had, of course, listened to recordings of Indian music and sitar and other instruments, and was very much like, wow, this is heavy stuff, pretty cool. Like I want to learn about it so I can, have it inform my guitar playing, or just I'm curious, right? I was always very curious. But something about that music in particular, when I was sitting in college with Ashish Khan, my teacher, my first teacher, it was like, okay, I gotta, I gotta go deeper into this, and I can't do it on guitar. So eventually, after a while, I sat with the sitar. It was even intimidating to like looking at it. I was like, it looks nothing like anything I've seen. And I tried Sarod first, which, if you're not familiar with Sarod, it looks a little more like a guitar, and you use a pick. It's fretless, but it has a little more of a resemblance to a guitar. And so I had tried that, but it just was not fitting right. It was awkward to hold, and I just wasn't jiving with it. So yeah, it was eventually sitting with the sitar. It just felt right, and that became this pretty deep obsession with that music and the feeling of that music and the study of it. So then I actually had studied for maybe 7, 8 years before going to India. And
Hmm.
that teacher I mentioned, my first guru, Ashish Khan, if you don't know, he's the eldest son of Ali Akbar Khan, who is from the family that taught Ravi Shankar, and just a very strong musical lineage. And he's just such a beacon of knowledge, and an amazing person to begin my journey with. So I was lucky I didn't necessarily have to go to India to start learning deeply from a master. And then the time came where it was like, all right, I do want to go to India because I want to be there and see the culture. And
Hmm.
but it was also like, I'd kind of really hyped it up because you just hear stories about it, and it's the pollution and the chaos. And so like I'm kind of like, oh, like I don't want to get really sick, and what is it going to be? It was kind of mentally just like preparing myself for the worst, like imagining getting off the plane and just like choking in like a bunch of toxic pollution and being crammed by people. And but I found that on my first trip there, it was so familiar, and just I was just so welcomed in the culture because people saw the commitment that I put into the music, and that is something people really value and appreciate. And it's a bit of everything. It's definitely a trip, and I think my favorite part of India is it's so opposite of the West. Like everything
Hmm.
is kind of the opposite. It's about tradition. It's not about personal identity. There are just so many people, but people don't seem to be, they seem to be happier actually when the infrastructure is less developed and there's more congestion. And so in a nutshell, just going to India was like a missing link, and something that I, after my first trip, made it a habit to go every year for around a month or so. And yeah, it just is a part of, the whole learning, the whole being in the culture and getting to perform there, and studying there as well. It's kind of like my happy place, because a lot of times when I go to India, it's like a retreat of just like studying sitar and playing all day, and there's nothing to really stop you from doing that there, because it's like it's much more affordable, and you're not cooking and doing laundry and errands. Like you're just kind of there. And for me, I use that time to just geek out on music. So yeah, I took a couple years off during COVID, and now I'm heading back um, in a little, just about a month. So I'm I'm thrilled to get back there.
Thank you. Thank you. I had a feeling that that would be part of the story. And I love how you talk about this opportunity to study with a master without having to go, because I think for a lot of people, we often think that the answer is maybe very far away for what we're looking for in a given moment. And I really admire how both in your musical education as well as your musical offerings, you've really seemed to make the most of the resources available where you actually live, and can bring a lot of what you've absorbed from Indian culture and other places as well to your community and to the people who are in your day-to-day life. I know you're very active as a teacher right now with Indian students. I'm aware. So
Mhm.
you are actually a very unique bridge, I find, between two different cultures. And I just love the name of the record because it's a true integration of places in the world that many people might also perceive as being quite different or opposite. But as a fellow bridge builder, I really love that part of your story of how you've really been a link between different parts of the world for people to understand on a deeper level and feel through the music, which is such a human experience rather than um, politics or economics or other ways of connecting to different cultural, expectations and histories. So I think that's a very, very, from what I can tell, a very special part of your musical devotion, and it clearly has been that. So yeah,
Hmm.
should we listen to another song?
I'd love to, yeah.
Let's do it. How about the Weekly Blues?
Weekly Blues, good choice. Yeah, this is another one of my favorites on the record. And I think we'll listen to the second part and I'll share there's an intro and then there's the tune, The Weekly Blues. And, there's a melody is universal, rhythm is universal, all cultures use these things. And in Indian music, there's a raga that is super bluesy and it's just got a great mood and vibe. And, I thought about like I've played this rag and melody like on my Fender Strat to just like jam out and bend. And, I grew up playing Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and just like that kind of lead rock style. And I feel like Rag Jog just sounds great and natural in that way. And so that's kind of like how the piece came out was like I missed really playing a lot of electric guitar, and I'm like, wow, I can bend like I do on sitar, and this rag has got this cool blues sound. And so it just led to this kind of dialogue of like raga rock blues. And the way I ended up creating it is there's a style in Indian music called alap that's very much like there's no rhythm, it's out of time, and it's just like floating melody. It's very meditative and lovely. And I wanted to do this a lot and have the dialogue be between electric guitar and sitar, and have it be this rag jog. And so that's the intro to the Weekly Blues, which kind of sets up this mood and this dialogue between sitar and electric guitar. And then what we'll listen to here is when we jump over to the main piece, we've got a main riff and our rhythmic cycle. I chose a cycle called Rupak, which in India is a 7. It's 3-2-2, and that's kind of the name. The name is in reference to the 7 days of the week. Weekly blues, seven beat cycle.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it was really fun. Like I've actually seven's very natural to me now. I've just spent so much time playing music where 7 is common that like it was fun to be feeling 7 with the blues and writing. There's some kind of blues changes and riffs and things, and fitting all of that into 7 with this kind of blues rag, um, and it was you, Josh, who kind of heard, like, originally it was just tabla and a couple guitar parts and bass, and you really heard that blues and rock, and you were like, we need some drum set on here. And I was like, all right, I'm feeling that. And we started getting that there, and actually started by using some like MIDI drum, just, as a start to get that sound. And eventually we decided to go with a live player, and it just brought such a cool life and vibe to the tune. And it was definitely the most challenging to keep all those voices clear in the mix, right? Drum set, tabla, 2 guitars, bass, and some spots where it's really fast and syncopated. And I think that was really a cool process of getting that mix together, and definitely required the most patience, I think, for that, because I just kept knowing that, well, the MIDI drums it's cool, it's helping, but we got to get some more feel. And so we both were like, all right, let's have Bodek play drum set, and kind of being able to articulate what we wanted to him, and he totally ended up nailing it and mixing it. So all that to say, this piece is it's really fun, and I think it's a great combination, this like raga vibe with blues and rock, and I get to really kind of solo on electric guitar, which is fun, and that's what I started doing before anything else. And a lot of people don't even know that I play that style, so it's just cool that's the expression of that on the album.
It is super cool. One of my favorite tracks for sure. And I remember when we tracked this in my studio in Nevada City, California, we were setting up for this recording session, and you had some ideas of how you wanted to do it, because of course you're playing all the strings on this record. It's really, really incredible how many layers of guitar and sitar you're able to hear and then throw down. So I believe we laid down the acoustic guitar first, and that was the foundation of everything. And then you did a pass through on the electric guitar, and I was hearing a totally different style of music come out than I had ever heard you play before on sitar and on guitar as well, because it was only the acoustic up until that point. And yeah, man, you're a mean electric guitar player. I really am excited to hear you get back to that origin. And I could tell there was a history there. There was a real connection that you have with the electric guitar, which has so much capabilities to really bring a song to life. So let's have a listen to it. We're going to listen to first the Weekly Blues Alap, and then the Weekly Blues by Will Marsh. So welcome back. Hope you enjoyed this listening session to the Weekly Blues and that it was able to transport you to a different dimension. I feel like the story of what this track really felt like to me when we recorded it was was so simple in its message. You know, we've all had those moments in life where maybe life feels a little bit routine or mundane or at times a little bit boring and kind of bluesy. And I think there's something about the blues that really just speaks to the soul. And I feel like this particular track, when I first heard it as just a guitar piece, was really ripe for that bass percussion support. And I'm so happy that we went there with it because it really took this album into a whole new genre. And I think there's definitely a lot more there to explore, you know, and it's so relatable. There's something about those chords and that rhythm and that combination of instrumentation that for me just works you know, so well. So thank you for trusting that that idea to take this song from maybe where you had originally heard it to where it became. I think that was a really fun journey.
It was an amazing journey. Yeah. And that's what I love. That's what a great producer can do. It's like you heard something that I had not yet heard, and it's really birthed something so cool. And it kind of stretches me, right? Because at first it's like my zone is like, okay, this is Indian rhythmic cycle. It'll be tabla and guitar, and it'll have electric guitar. But I didn't hear the drum set there. I didn't hear the bass. But man, that's just a kind of the full rounding out of this whole combination. And so yeah, super fun and super grateful to have you a part of this process, bringing out these things that I think the artist, it needs that direction, and at least for me, that's what the producer can uplift and up level the work. It's like I had the idea and the seed, but there was a little more to explore, and really glad that you saw that. And
Hmm.
I was stretched, but I was like curious too. I was like, all right, let's see, Josh, you hearing drums and bass? Like, I don't know, but okay. And then we just kept going with it, and it kept evolving. And yeah, I feel like that's a whole new kind of sound that I want to do more of, because I love rock. I grew up playing rock and roll and blues, and man, you're direct, that universal, that just that feel that you get from that type of music is still, there's so much to explore there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, that was so fun for me to get to be a part of. It really, I think out of all the pieces on the album, definitely required the most amount of attention, the most amount of mixing time, and yeah, kind of creative development to really bring it along. So I'm happy that you like it, most importantly. And that I hope, you know, other people like it as well, but you most
Yes.
importantly. And let's listen to one more because while we're on the subject of being kind of stretched a bit, you know, I think ironically talking about blues, I don't have much background producing blues music. Maybe I will in the future, but most of my experience has come from producing very slow, soft, meditative music. And I also remember in the studio when we first did that tracking session, you had come up to Nevada City with a list of some really, really beautifully composed songs that we knew we wanted to get out and record and properly, you know, express. And I remember at the end of the day when you were feeling a little bit tired and okay, I said what I have to say today. Um, I feel almost complete. I asked you, you know, can we do one more thing? And you said yes. And what wound up coming through was, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful compositions, improvised compositions that I've ever heard from a guitar player. It is so soothing and so special. And I love um, this particular track called Hygeia that was a real departure from a very kind of structured and organized way of writing and recording and producing music, and very I'd say ethereal and spacious. And I'm curious if you could, yeah, talk a little bit about what it was like to, again, kind of be invited maybe into a new space with that, and how that track felt for you to play after something like the Weekly Blues.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Reflecting back, I'm super grateful that you kind of picked up on like, hey, let's explore this piece called Hygeia that, it's a solo piece for nylon string guitar. And I just love nylon string guitar when you use fingerstyle. There's just so much voicings you can get, and just especially using a lot of open strings. And so this song is using that kind of open guitar playing style, but I'm really playing the melody of a rag that is called Rag Yaman, and just a rag that I've been totally in love with since I started studying it in 2006. And it just has such a dreamy, spacious feel. And a good melody transcends any musical boundary, right? A good melody can be played on any instrument in any context, and that's what I feel like makes the best melodies. And so Yaman on classical guitar is something I'd explored and played, and this is what you heard me doing. And I think I realized like, okay, this is a cool, like this intimate solo guitar, like with this, there's just a feel that rag brings, and that instrument brings. And so that's kind of how the style of that piece. And it was mostly improvised. There's one kind of structure that I had worked with in Rag Yaman that is like a theme. So you'll hear that theme there, but around that theme, I just kind of move around on kind of like in that space that we talked about earlier, when it's like I'm just with my guitar, just kind of creating and flowing and listening. And we got some of that happening, live with the recording of it. And I think that was really magical to capture that space. And while I'm playing the rag, I'm also like trying to find chords that don't break the mood of the rag and keep that dreamy feel. So these are the technical parts of what the piece is. It's this dreamy rag played solo on a classical guitar, while I'm still exploring chords and shapes that don't break that rag. And yeah, that's really how Hygeia came. And after listening to it, I got this idea of, what if there was like some nature sounds in the background to kind of add to the space that it's bringing you. It's very intimate and dreamy. And I know that's something that you've worked a lot with, Joshua, is kind of those soundscapes. And so, yeah, having you be able to bounce that off of me and work with some mixes. And essentially, I found some really beautiful bird song, and there's some crashing waves in there that I just feel like takes the listener even further to that space that the melody already does. And I think it's an area that I want to express musically in, is this kind of solo guitar space. And this to me is a great dive into that, and kind of way that we captured that that part of my music. And I think I can just see that being, I'd love to do more solo concerts too, and presentations where it's based on that feeling and that expression. So this tune Hygeia really captured that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to hear you say that too, because I think I think there's a lot of potential for perhaps the next album to be really focused in this genre. It's a space that was so inviting to listen to, and I could listen to that song all day. So let's hear it. Up next is Hygeia by Will Marsh. So we hope you like that one. It's such a beautiful, relaxing composition that I find blends just beautifully with the nature. And for me, creating this label and the studio was so inspired by listening to nature. I think that's been a theme throughout a lot of the work that has come through um, many ways of being a creative, spirit and force in the world, is to inspire people to really get back to nature and connect with it in a way that feels good, which has so much potential for improving our lives, and hopefully will inspire us to care more about protecting the nature. So that's definitely a big passion of mine. And I find that when we take the time to listen and really slow down, a lot can be expressed and felt and enjoyed and released and confronted that at first can be a little bit intimidating, but have always found is totally worth it. And I remember I had one uh, friend and teacher, I think it was Kavita Kat McMillan, share
Mm,
with me her introduction to when she learned to sing, which was so inspired by just going to sit in nature and listen and start to sing with it. And I
mm,
remember her sharing that philosophy with me. And I think this particular composition of Hygeia just really allows me to imagine myself traveling into the forest and being with you while you're playing this beautiful melody. And that was that was a bit of how I composed the soundscapes to support what the song is trying to say and create more of that kind of atmosphere and setting for us to be traveling to together through the sound.
mm,
And I'm totally a huge sound geek myself to really harness the full power of what's possible uh when we can close our eyes and really imagine ourselves in a different environment and just listen really deeply. I think that's a practice that as as I've gone deeper with has only been more and more nourishing, and definitely want to inspire other people to cultivate in their life.
mm.
And I'm curious, as we kind of wrap up here, what you might say to a young musician, maybe a teenager like yourself, when you were starting out, um, with all of this experience that you have now, or maybe someone in their 20s or later in life who are getting into it first time. Um, what would be some bits of wisdom or maybe even advice to offer to those who are just kind of getting started with that practice of listening and getting in touch with their own musical ability?
Mm. Yeah, I would advise, really treat it as something that you're nourishing yourself with, right? It's not like you're not trying to reach a goal of, you know, I need to be able to play this song by this time, or if you're later in life, you can't be thinking about, oh, if I started earlier,
Mm.
or if you're earlier in life and you really want to make it your career, you can't be thinking about other people and what they're doing and, how you relate technically or whatnot. So I think one of the best things is just really cultivating that kind of sense of devotion to your musical practice, really treating it as sacred time where you get to listen and access kind of this deeper, more whole way of being. It's whether you sing or play, like it's physical and it's audio. There's, like we talked about, that space that you get into, and I would really encourage you to remember that, even while you want to push yourself technically, you want to grow in, repertoire and all of these things, but at the end of the day, like, the musicians that I admire the most are the ones who just access such a sacred space through their music, and I have so many teachers where that's my memories of being with them, is just like they're so alive with that music, and that's what they share, kind of the essence of it. And so I would just encourage you to see that anyone can create that relationship in practice. And I'm a very like, if you're I'm a Capricorn, if that means anything. But it's like I love that. I love to practice every day, right? I love like the practice and the discipline of music. And what I would say is whatever time you have, if you only have 20 minutes a day, just make sure you try to do that every day. Like not in a way that's not fun, but just knowing that like it's a relationship, right? Like the more time you spend with your instrument. And to me, like the great things come like after I've warmed up a little and I've kind of gotten into a certain space where my hands are moving and my body's going with the instrument, and there's so much magic to come out of that. And so I just encourage you to like make it a part of your lifestyle, to be like, I want to sit with my instrument, however that looks like for you, if it's every day or a certain amount of time a week. But like the things that we measure and schedule are the things that like grow, right? Like your partners and your family, like you don't just try to fit in time with them when you can, you make time and you're intentional about it. And I think music is the same way. So yeah, I encourage that devotion and just in that commitment and carving out that time to grow that relationship.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Will. What a fantastic conversation. And before we close out, where can people find more about what you've got on offer these days? What's the best place for folks to come in and connect more with you?
Yeah, so a few places. My website has all my offerings, willmarshmusic.com. You can also find me on socials, Marsh Strings on Instagram. My music is all releasing through the main streaming channels, so you can find me on Spotify. And a great way to keep in touch with my concerts and everything I do is to join my newsletter, which you can do through my website. So these are the best ways to stay in touch.
Amazing. And of course, the integration will be coming out on November 17th through the Embodied Sounds label on all major stores, available for purchase as well. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, definitely give Will some love, and we hope you really love the album. Will, thank you so much again. It's been such an incredible adventure to make this with you. I really am very proud and excited to put it out there. So until the next one, enjoy your release release time for the moment, and look forward to see you soon.
Yes, brother. Thanks so much. This has been an amazing journey.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.